Hi everybody, I'm Ryan, and today we're going to look at the flex slots in mono green Nykthos, mono green ramp, mono green devotion, whatever you want to call it, because this deck is very, very good and is very, very fast. And even though it doesn't have Karn, it's still a combo deck. And so let's jump into it with the mono green list with 0 flex slots. So these are the cards you more or less have to play that are stock. So we have 58 cards in the main deck, which means there are only 2 flex slots, 1 land and 1 non-land. And there are 8 cards in the sideboard you pretty much have to play, which means there are 7 flex slots. So what can you choose from? These are the flex slots in the deck. I can make this a little bit bigger though. These are the flex slots in the deck. So for the last land slot, you could either play the 3rd Lair of the Hydra or the single Sunken Citadel. Lair of the Hydra just creates inevitability when you have a bunch of mana. Having man lands is just genuinely good against things like board wipes and whatever, to push through that last bit of damage. And so if you're worried about that, Lair of the Hydra is awesome. Sunken Citadel, the issue with Sunken Citadel is it enters tapped, and we don't love that. But what we can do with Sunken Citadel is we can add 2 mana to activate land abilities. So things like either Lair of the Hydras or Nykthos or Boseiju, we can use Sunken Citadel mana for, and be able to have less mana to do what we need to do, especially with Nykthos. I think that's very powerful. The kind of interesting part about Sunken Citadel is if we have a leyline start, we don't actually need a mana dork to start going off on turn 2, because we can turn 1 Sunken Citadel, turn 2 Nykthos, use the 2 mana from Sunken Citadel to activate Nykthos, have 4 mana or 8 mana, depending on how many leylines we started with. So it adds a kind of an interesting nut hand, but the entering tapped is a bit of a deal breaker. Also, as sort of a side note, you'll notice that one of the flex slots in the sideboard is an off-color card, an Elesh Norn. Sunken Citadel naming white is another way that we'll be able to cast that Elesh Norn, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. As far as the non-land slot, you can choose between an Oath of Nissa and a Polukranos. I think the decision is kind of obvious here, or I guess I don't know the correct decision, but the line of thinking is pretty obvious. The single Oath of Nissa adds consistency to the deck and, you know, early devotion, and Polukranos adds more devotion later on in the game, but is just like another threat and mana dump and whatever. Having more powerful turn 2 plays after we play a turn 1 mana dork can make the deck overall more powerful. So you want to select between these guys for those main deck slots. As far as the 7 cards in the sideboard, there's a lot of cards you can choose from. You have 13 different cards to choose from to fill out those 7 slots. Number 1, Elesh Norn, obviously very good against other decks that care about enter the battlefield things. So like, you know, the mirror match, maybe Convoke, you know, stuff like that. It's off color, which isn't a huge deal. So if you look at the no flex slots thing, one Sunken Citadel can fix it if we want to. But also if we start with a leyline, things tap for every color mana. Also Elcaster Trailblazer can add white if we want it to. There's a lot of ways that we can have white in our deck. Again, also Sunken Citadel, you know, if we decide to play Sunken Citadel. So the off color is a little annoying. Also Storm the Festival can just hit it. But it can be very powerful in just game ending against certain decks. Sharpshooter is an interesting 2-in-1 card where it's a reasonable amount of pips, is a 4/4 with reach, which is really good against all of these Slickshot show-off decks. But also it destroys an artifact or enchantment, so we can bring it in for those Slickshot show-off decks as an early blocker, and it's an artifact and enchantment card we can bring in, so it's kind of interesting. Cetacean Petitioner, there's a lot of crazy aggro decks out now. The red-green aggro and red-black aggro specifically are nuts. Gaining life equal to devotion to green can gain an obscene amount of life, especially since itself is 2 devotion, which means it's also a reasonable amount of mana pips for Nykthos. Polukranos Reborn in the sideboard is interesting. It has a lot of the same things that we'd like for Polukranos in the main deck. It just adds another threat, you know, it's a lot of pips, you know, whatever. But also it having reach and also not dying to Reckless Rage makes it a little bit better than Sharpshooter against the Slickshot decks, but it's just a body that can become a scarier body. So, meh. Obstinate Baloth is kind of interesting against discard decks, but also it's a guaranteed 4 life that you can play instead of Cetacean Petitioner. Nylea's Intervention is a new-ish innovation. You can choose one, search your library for up to X land cards, reveal them, put into your hand, then shuffle, which means you can grab your Nykthos, you can grab your Boseijus, whatever, it isn't just forests. Or Nylea's Intervention deals twice X damage to each creature with flying. So this is like really good in like grabbing our like things that we might need in our deck, like the Nykthos, so we can actually combo, but also like really decent against decks that have a lot of flyers. So I'm thinking like Phoenix, the Slickshot show off decks, you know, stuff like that. I think it's kind of interesting. The third Stone Brain is an option. Stone Brain is very good against these combo decks, like the Mirror Match naming Nykthos or against Lotus. And then a Licensed Hearse is just additional graveyard hate. So mostly for Phoenix, but there are other decks that use the graveyard as well that, you know, is pretty scary. So you're going to be selecting one of these lands, one of these non-lands for your main deck, and then 7 of any combination of these 13 cards for your sideboard as you continue to tune Mono Green Nykthos. So if you like this video and like this flex slot analysis, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.